What are you making?
I'm mixing up a stew to give corporate a different view. Have a taste. Welcome to the Corporate Kitchen. I'm your host, Tiger, and today on the menu is introductions. Now, this episode is very important because it is the first episode of the podcast. I'm super happy to reach this achievement, crack that first egg, and get this party started. I know in this year of 2025, there are millions and millions of podcasts out there, so I do want to take a moment to thank you all for listening and taking the time to see what this podcast is all about. The hardest part in anything is normally starting, especially when it comes to podcasts. It's hearing your voice, not loving it, trying to make the adjustments to make sure that the quality of the podcast is great for your audience. So I know this first episode is not going to be perfect, but I will continue to work on the quality and build upon it to make it better and better and better, so that you as the listener will actually enjoy the content. So what exactly did you sign up for? The Corporate Kitchen is a podcast that I hope you find fun, informative, and conversation invoking. Ironically, the idea of this podcast started from the conversations that I have with my friends. One of those being about how the United States education system doesn't properly prepare us for life. We think about debt, finance-related classes, and just general life skills classes that aren't available in high school. Moving on from high school into college, especially if you go into a niche field, you learn a lot about that specific field, but not the skill set necessary to prepare you for corporate America. That's where this podcast is going to come in and help give the 101, 201 level items that you will need in order to be successful in corporate America. Now, with that, you won't agree with everything that you hear, and that's okay. This is not about right or wrong. This is about introducing those 101, 201 level skills to help you either in your transition into corporate America or if you're already in corporate America to reflect on, right? Corporate is a chess game. There are many strategies you can utilize to play it, but at the end game is the same. It is to win. There are winners and losers in corporate America. I want to see you win. I want all of us to be winners. The reality is that's just not the way of the world. There will always be losers, but hey, here is my attempt into helping you be a winner. So I really hope this helps the community, like I said, either already in or interested in entering corporate America. If you're an early or new professional, you're going to find this more educational and on the educational side. Whereas if you're more tenured, I guarantee you're going to get a couple laughs out of this. Or you might find something that's like, hey, I didn't think about that in that perspective. But I'm going to include a lot of food-based puns in the episodes. I'm going to keep it light so it's not too annoying or corny. You know, I don't want to be Jason Tatum level of corny, right? It's going to be enough to drive the point and really simplify a lot of the concepts that we talk about. Now, what's the structure of this podcast look like? First of all, the core content covers one topic across 2 episodes per week. One topic, 2 episodes per week. This week being the topic of introductions. Episode 1, Tuesdays in the Kitchen, will cover the topic, its ideology, and a food or kitchen related analogy to help explain and simplify the topic, as well as 3 major takeaways to remember. I'm really going to use that first episode to explain and give the 101, 201 level details of the topic, really break it down, and again, some type of food or kitchen related analogy so that we can break it down and it's easy to digest, easy to communicate with others. Episode 2 of a week, Thursdays at the Table, will transition the topic from informative to reflective, where I give some real life examples and accounts of the week's topic, whether they're stories directly of me involved or stories of me that I witnessed or what happened with others. But I do want to share some real life stories similar to what you would do at a dinner table, right? To account for how this topic relates into the real world. In that episode on Thursdays, I will recommend 3 actions that one could take and help them in that topic area. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a licensed coach. So this isn't like, hey, take this advice and run with it. This is just an opportunity to hear a different perspective and hear some things that could possibly help you in your journey in becoming a corporate America professional. Again, with this schedule, I'm going to be posting twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, regardless of holidays. I know Thanksgiving's on a Thursday every year. We will still get episode 2 of that topic that week. I want to stay consistent. Therefore, we're going to do 2 episodes a week, 1 topic per week. So if my introduction was good enough and you're still here, welcome. We can start episode 1 of The Corporate Kitchen. We're going to be talking about introductions, and the analogy here is lemonade in the kitchen. To start, let's just go to the basics, right? According to the Merriam-Webster, the definition of introduction is something that introduces. That's a little annoying, so let's drill down a little bit more. And introduces in the Merriam-Webster says the following. It's to lead or make known by a formal act, announcement, or recommendation, to lead or bring in especially for the first time, to bring into play, to bring to a knowledge of something, place, insert. That covers a lot of ground and really enforces the fact that you do perform introductions a lot, and you have to do them a lot in corporate America. It doesn't always consciously feel that way, but based off the definition, it's the truth. Therefore, please know that you can do this. It's just like lemonade if we had to open up a lemonade stand. So let's break down this lemonade stand, right? You need water, lemon, and sugar to make lemonade. And that is usually the focus that people have on the lemonade stand. I need to make good lemonade. Equally as important, if not more important, is the actual stand. One thing that people have to understand on person-to-person introductions is that people have already judged you and already have a notion of you before you even open up your mouth. You make eye contact with someone, you approach them to introduce yourself. They've already made a decision about you before you have even said anything. That is going to be true for the lemonade stand. People will look at your lemonade stand, and before even approaching you to ask, may I have a cup of lemonade, they have already predetermined whether or not they're going to buy the lemonade based off of how it looks. So as much focus as we want to put on the lemonade, the first takeaway is introductions are hard because by the time we get to that physical verb step of doing it, people have already made a predetermined decision, whether consciously or subconsciously. And when you are performing an introduction, now you're trying to either sway them differently than what they pre-fixated on, or support that notion and continue to build upon it. That's why when we think about introductions, we have to think about the entire spectrum. We can't just say, hey, it's a verb. When I'm physically speaking or physically doing something, that's the intro. No, the introduction actually starts way before you start speaking, when they see you, how you're dressed, how you carry yourself, what's your posture like? Are you actually ready to speak, and are you looking in a position where you're ready to speak? All of those factors create the entire spectrum that begins before you actually verbalize your introduction. So let me again validate that introductions are hard. This is not easy. For those of you listening where introductions come easy to you, great. I'm very happy for you. And more than likely, you had enough practice at it where it became natural. For everyone else that are nervous about introductions or feel like it's hard, it is. I'm validating you. It is 100% hard. It is difficult. However, you can do it. As we talked earlier, you do it all the time. And based off the definition, you do it more times subconsciously than actually consciously admitting to it, right? So you can do it, and we do have to do it. We do have to do introductions. It happens all the time in corporate America, whether it's person to person, whether it's you presenting, whether it is you going somewhere, whether it's you volunteering. There's always acts and performances of introductions in corporate America. Even if you're in a niche where you're locked in a room, no one bothers you, no one talks to you, and you have a deliverable to give, that deliverable becomes your introduction. People are going to judge you before you even finish your deliverable, right? They hired you for a reason to perform a job. So that right there shows that there's already predetermined expectations on you before you have delivered the results that are expected of you for the job that you're doing. So don't ever feel that it's a level playing field. It's not a level playing field for the simple fact of all the predetermined factors, predetermined influences that make people identify a certain expectation with you and with the introduction that you're going to give. With that being said, though, for a lemonade stand, we know we don't have to be fancy, right? We don't have to have a digital billboard saying that, hey, come buy some lemonade, or that you have to park a Range Rover right next to the lemonade stand to say, hey, this is fancy lemonade, right? It doesn't need all that. What it needs to do is convey the message that lemonade is sold here and this is the price. That type of simplification is what you have to remember when you go into your introductions and you're prepping for it, right? If you're at a conference and you know that you're going to go to the career fair at the conference, you know you're going to have to dress up in business casual, right? That's part of your introduction to show, hey, I am serious about having a conversation about my career. Therefore, I am going to dress as such. You know that you're probably going to have to bring your resume because within that conversation, within that introduction, you're expecting to be able to communicate your experiences both verbally and through written word. So think about the prep that you already do and just remember that is just as important as the actual verb that you do for your introduction, whether it's verbal, whether it's delivering, whether it's presenting. You have to make sure that you are really putting as much work in the beginning as you do towards the middle and end. And that takes us to the perceived hardest part of all of this, right, is the verb. Now we're actually introducing. Going back to our lemonade stand, lemonade is made of 3 ingredients: water, sugar, and lemon. When we go to make this lemonade that people are going to taste, now we're like, how much lemon do we use? How much sugar do we use? Do we make this sweet? Do we make it just sweet enough? Do we add additional flavors to it? How do we make really good lemonade that everyone's going to like, right? What we do have to understand, and what the second takeaway is for this episode, is there's a threshold of good. We don't have the time to make customized solutions for everyone, for everything. A really good example of this is if you're trying to buy a car and you build it online. When you go to the manufacturer's website, you have to select a model, and then you have to select a trim level. So there is a base level already played into this that you have to select. That's your threshold of good here. That's what you want to remember that you want to start at. Once you have that, you can provide options, you can provide other opportunities to enhance it, but you do have to start with a base, and that base has to succeed the threshold of good. A corporate example of this is going back to the conference, you're going to the career fair, right? Let's say you're going to meet with 10 companies. Does it make sense to make customized talking introductions to every single company that you're going to see? No, that would be 10 different introductions. By the time you probably get through 3, you're going to forget what number 7 and number 8 looks like, right? What you would do instead is make your single elevator pitch that fits all 10 companies, and that is the base that you start off the conversation with. From there, you can enhance the conversation based off of how it's going and what the other person is telling you, right? So make sure when you are doing introductions, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a person-to-person meet and greet, that you have that base. And does that base have to be perfect? No. Does that base have to be 100%? No. The base has to pass that threshold of good. The grading scales are always changing, so let's call it 93%. It needs to pass the 93%. When you get in corporate America, there is a lot of talk about confidence levels. If we want to take that instead, we should say a 95% confidence level is your threshold of good, right? Where I know it's not perfect, I am going to identify that it's not perfect, but for me, it is enough that I am comfortable doing it, right? It's like, why don't we go down to an 80% or 70% confidence level? Shouldn't that still pass the threshold of good? I mean, that seems high if we go all the way to 95%. That seems great, not good. Agree and disagree, right? From a numerical value, yes, 93% or 95% confidence rating does seem high from a mathematical sense only. When you're actually going to introduce yourself, think about you on the receiving end of an introduction. If someone gave you anywhere between a 60%, 80% effort in their introduction, would you notice it? Absolutely. How would that make you feel? Would you truly want to be involved in a conversation where you can identify that the person across from you is not giving full effort or not giving what you perceive to be good effort, right? Not great, not perfect. We tend to kind of draw the line between great and perfect as very, very thin. So between good and great, there's a difference, right? And good enough is usually not that hard to make. However, when it comes to actually doing it, it does take effort. It does take intent to show that, hey, I'm trying to reach that. So going back to the lemonade, for example, we have our lemonade stand. Trying to make the lemonade, we need the threshold of good, right? 60 to 80% is not going to do. We want a 95% confidence rating. Well, obviously, we're not going to make it as sweet as possible. We're not going to make it as sour as possible. We're going to make it in between. We'll figure out based on the taste test, does it pass as good? And you have to be comfortable with that and say, this is good enough. Once you actually get into the stand, people start tasting it, then you get feedback, right? This isn't the episode to talk about feedback. However, I do want to acknowledge that you will get feedback and that will help you do better next time. That's the key that you have to remember for this threshold of good. When you're first starting, when you do your very first introduction, you don't know a lot. You're not the expert in it necessarily, and that's okay. So the threshold of good is based off of the knowledge that you have at the moment. If you're in an environment of continuous learning, if you're in the mindset that you will continuously learn, you will always change that threshold of good yourself and raise that bar higher and higher and higher, right? So the threshold of good of lemonade that you make the first go around is going to be different when we open up the lemonade stand tomorrow, because people bought our lemonade today, they tasted it, they gave us feedback. Ooh, now I am equipped with more knowledge on how to make good lemonade and pass that threshold. That's what you have to remember. You have to find that happy medium when it comes to customization. Once you have that base, you don't want to necessarily push for it too early. But going back to the knowledge piece, if you have the knowledge to do that customization, do it. We are making lemonade for an audience who's down south. Maybe we provide an option of also having sweet tea so they can make an Arnold Palmer out of it, right? You're making lemonade in a bar. You might want to have some alcohol with it, right? Like, there are ways based off of the audience and the knowledge that we have of our audience to really start the customization. When you're first starting out, reduce it. Start with the base plan. Really focus on, here is the content that I want to bring that's good. and wait for the feedback. And honestly, once you do it the first time, give yourself a pat on the back. Congratulations, you did it, right? This is not something that's easy. It's not something that makes everyone comfortable the first time that they do it. Think about the people that are in sales that are asking for money and asking for sales. The first time you're on the floor and they're like, hey, your job is to get $100,000 in sales, go pick up the phone, right? They're not 100% comfortable the first call that they make, but by the time they get to call 1,000, they have gone through so many trials that now their threshold of what makes a good call is really, really, really reinforced by all the knowledge that they obtained during the experience. So, the last thing that you need to know about these introductions, and this one's going to hurt, right? But you really, really need to understand is that rejection is normal. We have our lemonade stand. We made this lemonade that passes the threshold of good. We have it. Someone buys it. They taste it. They spit it out and says, I don't like it. That's okay. That is okay. People not liking your lemonade, people not liking your introduction. Rejection is normal. I know it's hard for a lot of people to feel rejection and to go through it, but it helps us learn, right? Even in the sense or the situations in which we don't get feedback, right? The person that tasted the lemonade, spit it out, said they don't like it, and then just walked away, it's still a point of feedback. There was something about it or something related to your stand that didn't meet that person's expectation. And you have to be okay with that. We can't be in a world where we expect that our actions will please 100% of people. If you are seeking that, that's a level of perfectionism that's not attainable or achievable. You cannot be so hard on yourself or ignorant that you believe everyone is just going to shake their head or praise everything that you do. There are going to be people that don't like and reject what you bring. What does this look like for introductions? Let's go back to the conference and the career fair, for example. I'll give more examples too, but that's a very common example. You're going to a conference. You're at the career fair of the conference. You talk to a company that you really want to join. You give the elevator pitch. It feels great. You think the conversation is great. And now you're inquiring if you can get set up for an interview. And the person you're talking to declines. They don't give you the runaround. They straight decline and say, I'm sorry, I cannot proceed you for an interview. And that hurts, right? To hear that out loud, to hear it verbally, it hurts. But you have to normalize that. You have to look at that situation and say, okay, I checked the box of doing an introduction. I felt that my threshold of good was met, and it didn't work out this time. Move on, right? There are 8 billion people in this world and counting. There are so many interactions that can take place on any given day. You will always have many other opportunities to introduce and perform introductions. What you need to remember is that rejection is normal, and you have to just treat it as, okay, it's normal, move on, and go on with your life. Therefore, the quicker we can get past this rejection, the faster we can get on to the next introduction, right? If you were at this conference and you were dwelling on the fact that that company told you, no, we're not going to proceed in the interview with you, how do you and how quickly do you reframe your mind so that you can talk to the next company? Especially if this was company number one, right? I said in the example earlier, let's say you wanted to talk to 10 companies. The first company is the one that rejected you. You still have 9 more companies on your list. You have to snap back into it and make sure you go through that entire list of 9. What happens if it's halfway through, right? You go through 4, number 5 rejects you. Does that mean that you're defeated? No. if your goal was 10 and you wanted to hit all 10 companies, do that, right? You got to pick yourself up and be able to hit the ground running again. What does this look like in other scenarios? Let's do a presentation. You're doing a presentation because a manager asked you to deliver to higher ups information regarding a project. You put the presentation together, you run it through your manager, and now you're presenting for the first time. You believe the threshold of good was met, right? Regardless of if you said too many times and too many times, if you were nervous, if you were shaking, right? We're going to cut all that out and say that's negligible. You did the introduction by giving the presentation to your leadership. And the leadership says, I don't like it. I don't like the project. I don't like what happened. Blah, 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 blah. That hurts. And that comes across as a rejection. The reason that you have to normalize that is there are other factors that play into all this, right? Going back to the lemonade stand, for example, the guy that spit out the lemonade, unless we knew who that person was, and he gives us feedback, we have no idea why he spit out that lemonade, right? If he spits it out and says, I don't like it, and walks away, that's it. The end, right? He walked away. We don't have any feedback to why he doesn't like it, which means that there can be a lot of other factors that played into it that we're not aware of. You can go down a rabbit hole if you decide that you want to look into every reason that someone rejects you. Does that mean you can't ask? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can go down a rabbit hole if you do it every single time. It's okay occasionally to get rejected, especially at that career fair example, to get rejected by 1 out of the 10 and you want to ask that one company why they rejected you. Or if 7 out of 10 rejected you and you want to ask 2 out of the 7, right? Doing it on a micro level, cool. Doing it every single time and trying to seek that feedback is going to drive you crazy. And it's not necessary because there are so many other factors that go into the introduction. When I started, part of the first takeaway, right, of introductions being hard is the fact that people have already determined how they feel about you before you even performed it. So there may have been something in the very beginning that they didn't like, right? Let's say that when they walked up to your lemonade stand, you were using red Solo cups. So they thought there was going to be alcohol available. Does that make sense? Probably not. But hey, you're not that other person. So you can't make the assumption that unless you know them and you know why, how they're feeling and how they are judging your lemonade stand as they're walking to it. The best thing that you can do, like we said in our second takeaway, is meet your threshold of good. Normalize the rejection, move on from it, you'll be totally fine. Last example I'll give. There are a lot of times in corporate America in which you are going to have to talk to another department. It doesn't matter if you're new, it doesn't matter if you're tenured, you're going to have to talk to another department. People tend to change jobs a lot in corporate America. Therefore, you might be meeting someone for the very first time. Regardless of how well you know that function or what that function is supposed to do, you might be introducing yourself to someone totally new. And you do it, they reply what they don't like you. Or it comes across with something that they do that makes you sense that they don't really care for you all that much. That's okay. Right? You have to remember in the workplace, everyone is paid to do a job. So if someone doesn't like you as a person, that's fine in the sense of the introduction. Where we transition out of introduction and into the actual work is the podcast episode about influencing, right? That's the tie-in to the introduction didn't go great. I got rejected. Where do I go to now? If it's a relationship that you have to sustain or a situation in which there is required continuation, You are now transitioning from introducing to influencing. If it's a terminated situation where we sold the lemonade to the person that spit it out and said, I don't like it, and they walked away, terminate it. Done. We won't see that person again. That's over. But in the other event, as I said, that is now a transition to influencing, and you're done with your introduction. Does that mean your introduction sucked? No. You felt that your threshold of good was met. Your introduction was great. It's good. You have to remember that. And if it comes to the point that you're now transitioning to influencing, that is a skill set that you do have to learn, because that is, in my opinion, much harder than performing introductions. Right on time. If you hear that sound, I'm going to play it for you one more time. That sound, that means we have a minute left. And that sound is just the kitchen timer on the oven. When it hits a minute, it will ding, right? So, minute left of this podcast. We're going to wrap up. Again, thanks for joining. I really do appreciate it. Key takeaways, as we talked about with our introductions. Number 1, introductions are hard. Number 2, threshold of good, just try to meet it. And 3, rejection is normal, right? Try to remember those 3 things when you're going about doing your introductions, and you'll just become incrementally better as you do more and more of them. And with that, we'll turn off this stove, take off the thinking apron, and let's just say the dishes will get done later. This topic wasn't a big mess, but if we learned something today, then we know there's a little cleaning up to do. I do want to talk this topic more, maybe trade stories about this soon, like this Thursday soon. I hope to see you there. Thanks for being in the corporate kitchen today. I'm your host, Tiger. Until next time.